And we're back. What's happening?
No, she did, but it's really low, look.
It's like you're having a conversation with my neck or my nipples.
Right.
Left. Right. What are we talking about?
No, so obviously we wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update what we've been up to for the last month. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably a bit longer than a month, but yeah, we've been through quite a lot. So we wanted to share with you, we've documented our month.
Unknowingly to me.
Well, no.
Oh yeah, the last month, yeah. Cool.
No, the last month. And then I did obviously film a little bit of your emotional roller coaster. Yeah, because this one has been doing a lot of purging and a lot of releasing.
Shout out to Tom.
Why? Does he know about that?
He always knows about my purging shit.
Yeah. So we wanted to sort of, come on here to kind of have an what we're saying,
Overarching.
No, that's not what I was trying to say.
No,
but just an overall catch up on what we've been through this last sort of 5-6 weeks, because it has been quite an emotional roller coaster. I mean, as you can tell, we're in a new location. We're kind of going on holiday for a month here
at the lodge
in Keston, while our plans are going through, and sort of getting together some ideas of where we want certain things in our retreat space. So we sort of thought we'd come here for a month while my brother's away. And the shift of energy is definitely, it's helped, hasn't it?
We transform wherever we go. But being here, it's been nicer.
The shift of energy, because obviously even coming into here, it feels a lot lighter, brighter. And I think we both feel that as well. Because when we're in your place, it's quite caved in, it's quite small.
There's no garden.
There's no garden, you can't really go out. We've done a lot of purging in that place.
Oh my God, that place, when we leave that place, that'd be like a...
But I feel like your last one was like the last emotional purge.
Yeah, I feel like, I feel like I've really purged a lot of grief. A hell of a lot of grief. I still kind of feel the residue of it from time to time.
Yeah.
Like I've had a few days last week where I was just feeling it. It's so weird to be outside of it. You're so used to experiencing yourself, you're so used to processing yourself through that way of being, to then be outside of it. It's like, to get the difference and the contrast, and to know that you're like, when you're seeing your old self, you know that you're entering into a new phase of your life. You're entering into something different, and it's so odd that's something you really have to experience in your life. It's not something you can process, but when you're seeing your old self happening inside of you, but you're no longer identified with it, and you're now seeing that it's old and that it wasn't actually truly you. It's a really it's an odd experience, but then it's so refreshing and so rewarding and so liberating to know that you are not that.
Yeah.
And
you don't hold yourself to that.
And you don't hold yourself to that.
But the thing is that when you are in the old self, when you're in the emotion, you don't see anything outside of it. But when you're doing this conscious work, you can actually become the observer of the old self. So say an emotion does come up, and when you are the observer and you're consciously healing, we were talking about this on a previous video, weren't we, a few weeks ago, about the conscious healing is so much deeper than the unconscious healing, where it's sort of just, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you're consciously on this spiritual journey and you're consciously healing yourself to free yourself from your outdated belief systems, the way of being, certain reactions, unconscious reactions where you have no control over, like it just, something comes up and it's just like bomb, you're in it. But when you're consciously healing and you're seeing the old self, and it is so mad, isn't it? Like, because I do it and then I'm like, whoa, like I just sounded like my mum then, or whoa, I did that in a previous relationship, and that's been something that's really, been quite reoccurring.
It's like when
in my life.
It's like when you process yourself through pain. That's the thing. Like I used to process myself. My sense of identity was processed through pain. So I processed myself. My whole sense of self was a painful sense of self. So, not feeling good enough, not wanting to speak out, not feeling loved, not feeling wanted, not feeling like you know, always feeling like I needed to be closed off, feeling like I wanted to be shut. That's who I kind of class myself. That's kind of like the undercurrent of who I believed myself to be. And then to be outside of that, and to realise that actually I am not that. That's, you know, that's when
you hold yourself to it, because you don't know any other.
Yeah.
You don't know connection. You don't know true love. And it's like, so you hold yourself to that to kind of keep you safe from experiencing true love and true connection, because from a child perspective, it wasn't safe to be open, it wasn't safe to be vulnerable, it wasn't safe to love. So this ego identity that we build ourselves around, it's all just to keep us safe. And obviously this, because it's so unconscious, we can literally go unconscious in any second with any trigger. But yeah, we've been really working through this, haven't we? Quite a lot. And I know the last time we purged, I did film a little bit of it. We did a little bit of Reiki, and that was in the previous video I posted. That night we did a Reiki session. Do you remember? We did the pamper masks with the horn thing. Oh, yeah. And then that night I did a Reiki session to you, and it was the one that I filmed to show what I do during a Reiki session. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And I posted that video. But that night after that Reiki session, because I did Reiki to you for at least 45 minutes.
You've done a hell of a lot of Reiki to me over the time.
Yeah, but that time was quite intense, because you were already going through the grief, because we were talking about the grief with our masks on. Do you remember you were talking about going through the layers? And then that night you had a bit of a breakdown, didn't you? We were laying in bed and suddenly this emotion come up, and I just held your hand, and I actually I filmed a little bit, just because, not because I wanted, more so because the video before we did say we're going to document our ups and downs. And, you know, people on Instagram, you see the life of, like, you know, the good times, the fun times, you know, but no one actually sees the, you know, the emotional, vulnerable times. So I filmed it, but obviously I'm only going to put it on with your consent.
Yeah, I'll, you know, me and you are completely open and transparent. We need to be as part of what we do.
So this is the day after the night before, in the evening. And how are you feeling after yesterday, baby?
The night before? Integrating. Yeah, it's so odd to be.
But just to let you know, he sounds like this because he's got teeth whitening in.
Yeah, well, my teeth, like, they've been slowly going through a rebuild process, so we're kind of going through that process. But yesterday
it was an emotional day, wasn't it? But I think it's like the full moon and everything. It was just so.
It was perfect.
It was really so intense, like the whole like coming up to it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And like you've done a lot of releasing and a lot of crying all week, really.
8 weeks.
Okay, yeah, it's been the last 8 weeks. It has, but it's just been like, but it has been breaks between. Don't get me wrong.
I swear, in 8 weeks, there's probably 5 days where I actually felt alright about myself. You know, when we feel down, right? We go and distract ourselves. We try to make ourselves feel better. But actually, when you're going through a spiritual journey, you are put into periods of prolonged suffering, longer periods of suffering than what you would just living a normal everyday life. Because when you're not aware of your suffering, you know, and you get down, something pisses you off, you like,
yeah,
you can override that situation, manipulate it, control it, whatever. You can avoid the emotion. As human beings, we're like masters. We're like masters of emotional avoidance. We've mastered emotional avoidance. Yeah. But when you go through a spiritual awakening, you are actually driven into your emotions. And so, like, one person might experience like at the worst case scenario, a week of feeling down, or unless you have severe depression. But when you're going through a spiritual awakening, these periods of depression are long, a long, intense periods. Well, they are for me anyway.
That's what I'm saying.
And I heard Barry, but Barry Long was one of my biggest teachers as I've come through my awakening. And he said, like, I remember watching one of his videos and he said, like, I have emotionally suffered to extremes. And I never really grasped that until actually I started to actually go into my shadow and be in his...
That's the thing. No one knows, the healing journey. You can't compare it to anyone else until you go through it. That's what I mean. Your experience is your experience.
Yeah, but technically, in truth, there's only ever one experience. Because what I've gone through, which is the actual core wound of aloneness, is the same core trauma that everybody experiences. Nobody experiences a trauma other than aloneness, because the trauma of aloneness is what is what pushes you into aloneness.
It's separation.
Separation, ego identity. Without aloneness, there is no separation, there's no ego identity. So me saying my personal experience is the same experience of everybody on the planet that is living from a sense of personal identity, that's living with coping, addiction, that's emotional avoidance.
Yeah, because like last night when you were grieving, you were going through that, you were going through the grief, because underneath the grief is the connection. But you've been so disconnected and so just identified with your own ego and coping mechanisms, how you coped with your grief, not actually dealt with it. And then seeing him last night, like going through his grief and actually going through those layers, it was just, it was pretty powerful. It was powerful, but I know, like I asked you, and I said, "Oh, how is it feeling? And can you feel the pain?" And you were like, "Yeah, completely." You felt the pain, didn't you?
Oh, it is.
Yeah, but you never allowed yourself to feel the pain. You didn't want to feel the pain, so you suppressed it. And that's what everyone does. No one wants to feel grief, so they suppress it.
Yeah, but the problem is, like,
they don't want to accept rejection, so they suppress it.
Yeah, the thing is, like, when you're so used to being in coping mechanisms, and I've said this a few times, when you're so used to being in a way of coping with trauma, you don't even realise you're in trauma. Like, I have literally been living in grief my whole life. My whole life I've been in a state of grief. My whole life. And I never even knew I was in a state of grief.
Everyone is living in a state of grief.
In a state of grief.
Everyone.
And that's why nobody knows what God is, because we're all in this grief that we don't know what the source connection is.
We don't realise we are it.
And the grief is at the very core of the grief, like, because you see me, I went through all these different layers, starting off at like the higher levels.
Shame.
Shame when I
guilt,
first met
fear.
you, but the last 8 weeks I've come through all of them small levels, all the way down into last night, which was pure aloneness. And to actually feel aloneness, that was so deep. And then I realised as well, like, after I cried and started to release the feelings of aloneness, I started to realise the deep grief as well for what I'd done to my children, because I've made my children feel alone as well.
Yeah, and this is how it gets passed on unconsciously through generations. And this is like how when you consciously suffer, so I think it's easier to consciously suffer because we know what we're doing. Like when you've got the tools and the knowledge to know what to do when you are hitting a growth period, like, you know how to go through that process. Like, we know we have to run our energy, we know we have to connect more, ground ourselves, meditate, be with ourselves, not escape ourselves, because that's the moment anyone feels any kind of suffering or any pain, everyone automatically goes and copes with it by drinking, numbing it, being busy. But because we are consciously going through these layers since we've been together, it's like we are not hiding, we're not running away from it, we are completely facing ourselves through each other. And I think it's such an amazing journey. And yes, it is painful, and this is why we want to like document it, and we want to be real with you guys, because everyone might see us happy. Oh my God, you're the happiest ever been. Like, oh my God, you look amazing. You're smiling, you're so happy. Oh my God, okay, behind the scenes there's some fucking work going on. So we're just gonna be real with you guys, and just we're gonna document, and we're gonna post these weekly, aren't we? Just little updates of actually behind the scenes what we're doing.